Hey, Emma, appreciate you coming on to chat.
Yeah, Jeff, excited to be here.
Awesome. Do you want to start off by just giving like a quick intro and like update on your background and experiences you've had?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Been in sales for a while now. I started my career actually in software development recruiting and then moved out to Utah for a startup that took a chance on me to get into sales. And that was my first sales experience, actually, was working for an early stage startup. I was employee 30, I believe, there. So learned a ton, great experience, and then really have been in sales since then. Done a lot of commercial, some enterprise, and I'm in commercial now.
Amazing.
So
That's
another
so
startup.
not a startup. What made you gravitate towards startups?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but I
Yeah.
think I really enjoy having a seat at the table. And I would just say impact. I think that I love sales and I really enjoy that aspect of the job. But I think at startups, there's so much more than that. You have a say in product, you get to know engineering, you get to know all of the different departments. And if you work for sales at a really large organization, that's not necessarily the case. And so I think, the impact that you can have at a startup is a lot greater than some of the bigger companies. And I personally really enjoy that.
That's cool. Yeah, we'll talk about this a little later, but one of the things I noticed about you and following your content is you talk a lot more about almost like a subject matter expertise in the software you're selling. I see a lot of sales content creators and they're talking a lot about sales, but they're not talking about like the content about whatever product they're selling. And you do that a lot. And my hunch is maybe that might have something to do with what you just said about being early stage. You forces you to become maybe an expert if you join a later stage company that has like all the playbooks and everything. Is that fair?
I would say yes, and I think that I'm a big fan of LinkedIn social selling. I think that it's a really good area to meet people and really understand your customer base. And in my mind, if I'm posting only about sales, why would an engineering leader want to connect with me, right? So
Right.
I
Yeah.
want, when I send a connection request, I want them to go to my profile and see that I am posting the latest research, what I'm learning in this space, resharing things that I'm learning from other engineering leaders. And then in my mind, they're going to want to connect with me. And so I think,
Yeah.
and it can spark conversation, right? If I'm posting certain things, asking for feedback, I think it can be, almost a lead gen area. But I think generally speaking, I want to be known as, a product expert. And I want to be known as someone that they would want to talk to me because I know what I'm talking about in this space.
I mean, it makes so much sense. Another thing that I noticed is when you do talk about sales, you had a recent post on this, but you do talk a lot about sales, in my opinion, from like what I would call as a founder, like a user-centered design perspective, or like a design where like, what is the experience? What's the journey that someone is going on as the buyer? And I love your perspectives around this. Your last post around like making it easier to buy. So I want to just kind of dive in on this and get a little bit deeper, but can we start off by like summarizing your philosophy around selling and making it easy for your customers to buy?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm sure we can link the post that you're talking about, but I recently did kind of go through the buying experience as an end user, which isn't super normal as an AE, right?
Yeah.
But I had a
Yeah.
really interesting experience, and it has made me think a lot about this because I think generally speaking, I always try to make it easy for buyers, but being the buyer on the other end was really interesting. And I think that no matter what market you're in, it's competitive. That's just
Right.
kind of
Right.
the times that we're in. And so you should always think that, a competitor is coming for you, even with happy customers. You should think that you are up against, all of your competitors and act accordingly. And because of that, I think, unfortunately, there's a decent amount of not great sales reps out there. And I think they give sales reps a bad name sometimes. And so I think in my mind, I'm always trying to be the best sales rep possible and make it as easy for customers to buy as possible. And that means being really not self-serving and really thinking about the customer throughout the entire journey, right? It's not about what I can get from them, it's about what I can give to them. And you have that kind of relationship. And again, going back to even being a product expert, right? Those are the people that are going to want to work with you. Even
Yeah.
if your product isn't even there yet, right? Like I've had that happen before where people have went with our solution, not even at my current company, but because they liked working with the team. We made it really easy for them. We got back to them in a timely manner. We knew our stuff and they ended up going with us, even though we had some product gaps, right? And so I think,
Right.
that's the name of the game in this day and age, selling.
So how do you how do you like what do you think are some of the biggest barriers to making it making it easy to buy, or what are some of the things that people good, well intended reps that are great reps do that actually make the buyer journey more complicated, less simple, etc.?
Yeah. Good question. I have a couple things. I think one, generally speaking, human beings are lazy, including myself,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
including
sign me up.
yeah, including our buyers. And so I think that sometimes we assume that they'll take care of it, they'll do that, and it's like, no, you need to assume they're going to do nothing, and you need to do as much as you can for them. And so I think a gut check on that is, if I'm deciding whether I should make this report or do X, Y, Z, it's like, oh, that's going to take a little bit of time, but is it going to move the needle? And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to go do that, right? Even if it takes more of my time, because it's going to move the needle. Now, I'm not saying go spend time on doing all of these different things, but being really smart, working smarter, not harder, but going the extra mile because your competition likely isn't, and that's what's going to win. So I think doing as much as you can for customers, and that's what I talk about in my post. That's what someone did for me, and I ended up purchasing their software, which we can get into. But I think the other thing too is, I've seen this happen all the time, but in discovery calls, in demos, throughout the journey, sales reps make it so much about them and making sure that they, do the mutual action plan and making sure that they get all the information they need to forecast the deal properly, right? And your prospect does not care about that. Unless you're selling to sales leaders, they're pretty cool about it. But I am not selling to engineering leaders that do not care at all about that, right? And so I think I am always really trying to understand what is most important to them, what can I spend my time on? And that means I show max 2 slides and I get into the product, I poke around exactly what's important to them. No filler fluff. I think that is really important to me. And I do frequently get feedback at the end of calls from leaders saying, wow, thank you so much for going through that so quickly. Thank you for talking about exactly what I came here for. And that goes a long way. They're going to set up another call with you versus your competition, even if you have the same features, because they like that experience better.
Yeah, I think you raised a couple really interesting points around there's certain things in your sales process that are there for you, not there for the buyer, for your, like you said, forecasting, internal updates, whatever it is. I like calling it out and just being really thoughtful. Am I really getting this information in service of the buyer, or is it in service of me? Something that I've noticed a lot as I do sales, but also as I've been sold to. It's funny because I do a little bit less sales now that we have a sales team at Grain. Before I was doing a ton of founder sales, and now I'm kind of getting sold to more than I was selling. But there's even small things like when you're setting up a follow-up email, when someone's like, hey, I want to set up a follow-up call. What times work for you? I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. Now I have to go check my calendar, blah, blah. It's so much easier if it's like, here is the time that I want to scale. You free at this time? If not, here are 2 fallback times. It's like, okay, you've done just that little bit of cognitive work for me to make it easier. Even better if they're happened to catch who my assistant was and hey, I'm looping in Ella so I can work with her and schedule. I think about just these small interactions that you want to take as much cognitive load from your buyer as possible on every single step of the thing. Another thing example is when reps tell me about pricing, I'll ask about the pricing. They'll give me generally our pricing is this and it's this per seat and it's this and this. I'm like, I now have to do some math. It's not saying of course I do lots of math, but it's I don't want to do that. Just tell me oh, I think you'd probably buy 3 seats. And given what I understand, it's probably going to be this per month. Just do the work for me. Don't make me do thinking.
Or holding back on pricing. That's a hot take. I know, we might get some people coming at me for that, but not telling people pricing when they ask is.
I don't think you can do that in this market. I really don't. I think that's maybe 10 years old sales thinking. I get it. I get where it comes from. It's you want to sell on value. You don't want to sell on price. But if your buyer's asking you for a price and you try to hold it back, I'm sorry. It's just I mean, again, I'm maybe not the average buyer as a startup founder. I get it, but it's I don't know, when someone does that, it gives me just a bad taste in my mouth. It's you're the type of company that's going to not let me cancel when I want to cancel and just have tons of bureaucracy. And it's I just don't like dealing with, I want very customer friendly companies. I want to do business with people that are very customer friendly.
Totally. And I think you're right. There's so much competition out there. You have to do that. And ideally you would be showing value on the first call anyways, because if you don't do that, you're going to lose anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
Show value, then talk about price. But one other thing I'll just plug really quickly. I am reading a book called Smart Brevity right now. And I think all sales reps should read it, or at least read about it. And it's all about
get the Blinkist or something, at least, at the very least.
bullets, right? Like make
Yeah.
it short. That is something I've been working on so much in my emails. I think that, oh my gosh, I've read so many emails that are just paragraph after paragraph. No one is reading that.
Yeah.
You
No.
need it to
No.
be as short as possible. I even started taking out the whole, hope you're having a good week, like get to the point, especially with executive leadership. I think that is like a huge persona that you just want to get right to the point.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm someone who I like naturally want to be more friendly. It's just my personality. But I agree with you. It's like even things like, hey, I hope you had a good weekend, blah blah blah. It's like I don't know. It's like you've
Yeah,
now
I
just
don't
pushed
care.
the thing. It's interesting, and obviously there's room for that once you have a relationship. But I agree with you. One of the really good things that still sticks with me from my time in consulting was I had a manager who like literally would go through my emails and like every single word was like that word's unnecessary, that word's unnecessary, that word's unnecessary, and then she would have me send my own emails to myself and see if this was in a BlackBerry back in the day. But it's like if you have to scroll once on the BlackBerry to finish the email, like no one's reading it. And
Yeah.
so I tried to keep that kind of practice. Obviously, no one has BlackBerries, but like that's kind of how I think about it. It's like if it's on your
Totally.
phone and it's got to be really easy to read on a phone and no scrolls to get through the email as a good rule of thumb. Or if you need to put extra email, finish the email and just be like below is additional details. But you want to get the main point, like in an iPhone screen, couple lines, no scrolls.
Totally. One other thing that I've been using, and I feel like I'm going to sound like such a sales influencer right now, and I promise I'm not. But I have been leveraging the virtual sales room or deal room, whatever people call them. That was actually one thing that was my way of working smarter, not harder, making it easier for my customers, but also making it easier for me. I just found that I was sending so many emails because we have a lot of follow-up information that we have to send
Right.
after a first call. Help docs, technical things, customer stories, all of these things. And I was just feeling like it was getting so long. No one was reading anything I sent. I don't know if they're reading it, right? There's no
Yeah.
analytics on that.
Yeah.
And
There's
then the
no
emails
data.
were getting long. Things were getting lost in email threads. And so I started using that. That has been super helpful also in kind of breaking things up, making it really easy for the buyer. I can have a pricing page. I can have security pages when the time is right and flip that on, right? It just makes it a much easier experience for the buyer. And then selfishly, in the spirit of working smarter, not harder, all I have to do is duplicate a room, send it right away. It takes me 2 seconds to send a follow-up email versus before having to copy all the links and everything.
Yeah.
So that has been really helpful as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great call in this theme of like, how do you make buying easier? These deal rooms, especially if you have a more complicated deal that needs something like it, it's great to look at. What do you use? We won't. We have no problem with shouting out great software here.
Yeah. I use Trumpet.
Trumpet. Okay, nice.
Yes.
To the point of things being competitive, is there's a lot of options, so it's interesting
Totally.
to hear what you like.
Absolutely.
Very cool. I've heard Arrows is good too, but I don't have a lot of great direct experience with deal rooms. Our deal cycles tend to be a little bit more simple, I'd say.
Yeah, ours are long. You need a lot of people, so that's been another really helpful
yeah.
thing. Is it makes it easy for my prospects to send that to their boss or involve other people in. And then I also get to see, who's going into the room, which is helpful for me as a seller, but it makes it really easy for them to sell internally. And I think that is one thing in the spirit of making buying easy, I think is really hard for people. Depending on who you're selling to, if you're selling to sales leaders, it's a little different, but
Yeah.
I'm selling to engineering leaders. I've sold to customer support leaders. Their job is not to sell. That's my job. And so anything you can do to make that case and just give them as much as possible so that they can go sell internally, I think is huge. Otherwise, they're not doing it or they're doing a bad job of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what we said earlier. It's like you're giving them more work. So you want to take as much work away from your champion as possible. Well, that's cool. So you mentioned earlier, and if you don't remember, you're going about this post and the experience you had that ultimately led to sell. You said you were going to say more about that. Do you want to share anything there?
Yeah, totally. Because it brings up a couple things. I think I talked mostly around kind of making it easier, but I transparently was using a tool and I was pretty happy with it. I was paying for it out of pocket because I felt like I needed it.
Okay, interesting.
Transparently, I did not do a lot of research on the market. So I was kind of like, did a Google search. I was like, yep, this will work. Started using it. A competitor of that company reached out, and I'm not saying names because I don't want to,
Yeah. I like it.
A competitor of that company sent me a LinkedIn message. It was a great LinkedIn message. It included a voice note. As a seller, game respects game. And
Okay,
so
I have a question here. I got to stop you here.
Yeah.
Do you think that was just like random, coincidence, or did they somehow know you were in market?
That is a good question. I actually don't know, but I can ask this person and follow up with you.
I'm really curious because I talk about outbound a little bit with some is like, and this
Yeah.
is like signal-based selling is kind of one of the big trends right now in outbound. It's always interesting to be like, how are people in a really smart way trying to figure out if people are in market? So I'd be curious. Yeah.
I will get back to you. I'll leave a
Okay.
comment on
Amazing.
this when I
Okay.
think about
Amazing. Amazing.
it. So this person reached out to me and was like, hey, and what I appreciated, I am not a decision maker. I'm an individual contributor, so I'm not necessarily the right person. So I thought that's what I was going to be saying, but he actually was looking for information. He sent a really tailored voice note targeting my exact experience and asking for information about my leadership team. And I was like,
Oh, interesting.
good job, dude. So I gave it to him. I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, transparently, I'm using this competitor, but I'm open to hearing about how you guys are different. I'm interested. I didn't do my research. So he sent really quick, here's how we're different. And he was like, if you're open to it, I would love to have you try this out. And I was kind of like, I don't really want to do that. This took a second to get spun up. I'm not
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
into it. Again,
No,
I'm
I
not
don't want to have to go through another onboarding, blah, blah, blah.
no, I already did
Yeah.
it and we're good. And this is working well for me.
Can I stop you right now real fast?
Yeah.
So I'm curious about this message of like, this is how we're different. I think this is something that a lot of salespeople get, right, in this market where it's like, how are you different than X leading tool? I'm curious how this person answered it and like why it worked, or if you have any thoughts in general of like how to answer that question.
Yeah, that's a really good question because it is tough. And I think that, in the market we're in, it's so easy for competitors to just kind of like build each other's things. And so I think sometimes there's really not that many differentiators. So I would say two things. He definitely knew what he was talking about regarding the gaps of the other company.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think that's important because truly, typically, there's not that many gaps. Like I said, I think a lot of softwares are, similar these days. And so specifically calling that out, I think is important. I have felt that as a seller in my space. I can tell competitors are calling out our gaps and I need to do the same. Like I can just feel that when someone gets on a call and they're like, you don't do this. And I'm like, okay, you've been talking to a competitor, and that has made me be on my toes because I don't like, leading with that.
It's not my favorite thing either, to be honest.
It's a good sales tactic. And so that's actually something I've been trying to think of is how do I kind of do that in a not sleazy way? But anyways, I say all that to say his was not sleazy. I asked for the differentiators, right?
Right,
so he clearly called out some of the gaps and where they are better. And then I think really what did it is that he offered to set me up in their platform. I think that if he had just left it at here's our differentiators, those differentiators
weren't enough to make you like,
no. Because I didn't have any pain with what I was using. It was totally fine. It solved my problems. It was great. And so him saying, hey, we're better in these areas, I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, that sounds like it'd be nice to have, but like, I don't care enough to switch. And so he offered to get me spun up on his software, completely migrate things over. He basically like designed this whole thing for me. And I was like, well, yeah, if you're willing to do that, I'll certainly consider it, right? And he did. He went above and beyond, showed it to me. And of course, he set up a call, which good on him, right? He was like, all right, if I do this, can we jump on a 15-minute call to go through it? And I was like, hell yeah, we can.
Sure. Yeah.
So we did, and the rest is kind of history. TLDR is that he just really did a good job of kind of keeping a tight sales cycle, following up on things, using me for information. And again, I enjoyed working with him. I think that is so important. He made it easy for me. He kept it really tight. He knew what he was talking about. Every call he showed up prepared. He knew the right people. I would get on the call and he's like, okay, so what do you think so-and-so will care about this? And I'm like, all right, you know what you're doing. And that made me want to work with him. It made me want to champion this software internally. And I did. And our whole company bought it. So now I'm not paying out of pocket. My company is, and we rolled it out to everyone. So
I love it.
Story to that rep.
I love it. It sounds like lots of really great practices there. One thing to this point of like, how do you answer this question? Like, how are you different? Yeah. Something that I've been doing that I'm curious what you think about is like, because the problem is like, when you make that a feature question, like you said, it's like, oftentimes like, are those features enough to get me to do the work to switch? Even if there is a gap today, like software moves so fast, like will those gaps exist in a few months? So I've really been trying to answer is like, this is who we're for, like answering, like help the person see either if they are or if they are not, just be like, this is primarily who we're for and this is why we're for you. So it's more about like our focus and the type of people we work with and really prioritize rather than a feature battle. Because there are competitors where it's like very clear that we're kind of prioritizing different segments, and we might both say, oh yeah, we do all this because we're competing in the market, but you really know where our people are focused. And if a buyer is actually not in that focus group, I'll tell them that. And I just try like this point of like making buying easier. It's like, I think one of the easiest way to buy is when you're working with a company that's really focused on you. There's a lot of sales reps out there that are just, they'll kind of take any business. And I'm not saying that's bad. I mean, you have to hit quota and stuff, but when you're working with a rep where it's like, I'm their ICP and I'm their target persona versus like priority number 3. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. I think that is exactly how you do it in this market because like you said, and I use that all the time too, we talk a lot about how, this is a business decision. You're likely not going to make a business decision on one little feature gap here because like you said, our team's actually willing to build that. So who do you want to what is the saying, hitch your cart to? I never say that, but you know what I'm saying. Who do you want to partner with in the long run? I think that is what is important, and saying kind of who this is for is really helpful for people to understand, here's the goal of partnering with us and here's how we work with our customers.
Yeah.
We offer trials, and I think I typically call out too, this is why we offer a free trial, because you can see all of this in a demo, but let me show you what it's like to work with our team and the experience that you're going to get with us, because that is, again, what people care about. And I like what you said too about calling out if, they're not your ICP. If you're like, hey, if this is really what is most important to you, then actually I do recommend that you go with here. However, here's why people buy X.
Yeah, here's why we still work with people like you.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm in the fortunate position of being like the founder, CEO, so I can,
yeah, we'll build that.
I'm not on the hook for a quota, so I get it. It's not necessarily the best, for every rep in every circumstance, but that's something that for me, it's I'm at the point where I don't really love doing business with people who are far away from us, because as the founder, I feel like that pressure is to say yes. And I want to help my team focus. I don't want my team to be pulled in all these different directions. I feel like the way you make a great product in this market is you just get really tight on where you're focusing and help your customers see this is the benefit of partnering with us over the long run, because we're moving to this mountain together. So yeah, I think that's not every related point. Is not every software is like this, but I think helping your customers see that this is a longer term journey. It's we'll give you the out, we'll give you the out anytime if it's not working for you, but this is the benefit of working with us for many years and the compounding benefits of investing in our software together rather than trying to make it transactional. Because think about the best software you use. It really is something where it becomes a relationship where you invest in that software, and it's the thought of getting off of it becomes very daunting. And I think that is the goal for us at Grain in the product we're building, but also the types of, the relationship we have with our customers.
For sure. And I think that is so important, and we're both probably feeling this working for startups historically, right? Is you're not going to have the features of Salesforce, right? Because you haven't been around as long. It is really about kind of what does this partnership look like? Here's why we exist, right? Here's why we got into the Salesforce market or whatever market it is, because we found the gaps and blah, 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 and all that.
I love it. It's great stuff. Well, as we wrap up here, for folks who want to find you and follow along your journey working as early salesperson at startups, what you're doing now, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, totally. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love talking about startups. I love talking about sales, specifically people who are early in their sales career. I love talking about that. I think it's really exciting. I think there's so much opportunity with sales that a lot of people don't realize. And I think there's a lot of kind of quick, easy wins that you can experience. So if that's interesting, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
I think it should be interesting because you got awesome things to say. Well, Emma, I really appreciate you spending the time to chat. I learned some things in this conversation, and I hope other people did too.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, of course. All right, we'll talk to you later.